Drones. A whole new way to see the world no matter what you're filming. As you might have imagined, I use mine to chase trains every chance I get. I thought I'd make this video to show my method of operations when rail fanning from the air, covering everything from the best camera settings to pre-flight checklists, and of course, piloting tailored for rail fanning. Ever since I received this from my awesome parents as a Christmas present, I've been determined to take my rail fanning videos to the next level, both literally and metaphorically. I use the DJI Mavic Pro to chase trains from the sky, be it the Great Smoky Mountains Railroad, flying over Folkestone Rail Watch, or a relaxing pace of the auto train. The first thing you want to do with the Mavic, or any camera for that matter, is tune the settings how you like them. In my case with the Mavic, this includes camera sharpness and shooting modes. Starting off with sharpness, it determines how much definition the camera captures between objects. I find the sharpness affects trees the most, determining whether they look fuzzy or defined. Sharpness is usually not apparent in static objects, like the trains themselves, but I've found that it makes a big difference for the surrounding object's appearance. This doesn't necessarily pertain to the trains themselves, but every controllable detail can make a pacing shot look better and better. The second step in setting up my Mavic is choosing the resolution and frame rate. If you've seen enough of my videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of HD 60 FPS recording. Thankfully, the Mavic Pro offers such a setting, so I basically just stick with that one. It matches what I record on my camcorder, and I love how it turns out. Now, I'll be honest, chasing trains with the Mavic is hard work. It takes a while to properly set up, and in the midst of a heated chase, sometimes there's just not enough time to do so. While the settings I just reeled off are basically universally applicable, this video is about rail fanning with the drone. So honestly, I just leave most of the settings at a happy medium, so I don't have to worry about them during a chase. Once I've figured out all my camera settings, it's time to get the drone in the air. But before doing so, the most important thing is to let the drone warm up. I've been frantically trying to get the drone in the air on multiple occasions, taking off directly after turning the Mavic on. The result? A very gray, foggy, almost flat-looking video. Luckily for me, the auto train was going slow, and the Mavic warmed up in a couple seconds. Sometimes you don't have a couple seconds and end up walking away with only a bleak shot, like this one of the Florida Central in Apopka. After the drone has warmed up, I like to pick an altitude to fly up to, preferably one that is clear of any obstructions. I know for myself, as I'm pacing a train with the Mavic, I'm usually preoccupied and not as attentive to the drone's surroundings as I should be, exemplified by this extremely close call as I was pacing Amtrak 184. For this reason, I like to make a full, slow circle around the area I'll be flying in, making sure there is nothing in the way of my drone and the horizon line. With the all clear, next I like to practice my flight path. This might sound finicky, and honestly it may very well be, but I'd rather not be figuring out where to go as the train is bearing down on me. For me personally, I like to be looking down on the train at anywhere from 80 feet or above. Any closer and I feel like the drone isn't doing its job, that is, to get the most abstract yet cinematic angle possible. That's just my opinion. I've seen plenty of other rail fans who make low altitude droning shots look awesome, but as evidenced by this video, I cannot. When rail fanning trains from the sky, I like to pace them for as long as possible. I prefer doing this over keeping the Mavic still because, the way I see it, I can get a stationary shot on the ground with my camera whenever I please. What I can't get whenever I please is long, drawn-out pace shots from 170 feet in the sky. Just about the only downside to pacing the trains is that sometimes they'll outrun me. Such was the case at the Longwood Sunrail station whenever I thought I could keep up with Amtrak's Phase 1 Heritage engine. I was sorely mistaken. With that said, keeping pace with the trains requires knowing their approximate speed and whether or not the drone is capable of such a speed. If I'm not entirely sure of the train's speed, I like to throw the Mavic in sport mode just to be safe, where I can pace trains up to 39 miles an hour, wind permitting. I neglected to do so one afternoon in Winter Park, thinking there's no way train 97 would be coming in hotter than 20 miles an hour, the Mavic's top speed when not in sport mode. I couldn't have been more wrong, and ended up looking at the rooftop fans more than anything. When it's a given that trains will be traveling at mainline speed, I try and get the Mavic up to speed well before the train reaches me. This allows for a consistent pace of the train instead of trying to catch up to it. Other times I know for a fact that the train will be going slow, and I'll keep the Mavic out of sport mode. This allows for much more control over the drone's movement, which in turn makes for some much calmer and cinematic footage. Being aware of the drone's range is always of utmost importance. While the return to home function works like a charm, I still feel much more confident when I have the drone under my control at all times. I paced the James E. Straits Carnival train about 1,700 feet north of me and stopped as soon as the image on my phone started showing signs of poor connection. Through trial and error, I've come to learn that the image on my phone is not, in fact, due to loss of connection, but instead to my phone's CPU overloading. I was pacing Conrad Yelvington in Sanford one day and was able to take the Mavic over half a mile away while maintaining a steady 10 miles an hour. This was possible with the consistent and slow speed, in turn not overloading my old phone's CPU. Flying speeds aren't the only thing I like to keep smooth either. Herky-jerky panning of the camera or sudden variations in speed are appealing to nobody, so I've gone into the Mavic's settings and put a maximum speed on the panning and made sure that the camera comes to a smooth stop when doing so. Yet again, more minute details that are finicky at the least, but overlooking something simple can sometimes make or break an otherwise awesome video. Like I've mentioned before, I enjoy the Mavic because it allows me to get a totally different angle on the trains. Such was the case in beautiful St. Augustine as FEC 230 glided through the marshes paralleling the river. I would never be able to pull this off from the ground because, well, it's just impossible. When using the Mavic, I like to take into account the area surrounding the tracks much more so than usual, because there's so much to see aside from the tracks at 100 feet up in the air. If you know what the surroundings are like ahead of time, incorporating them into the shot never fails. I had arrived at downtown Tavares one morning with my drone and got up in the air just in time for the Orlando and Northwestern's tourist train to come along. I knew there was a stretch of track that nudged up to the lake, so I took full advantage. It's almost impossible to get a good ground-level picture of the train and the lake. Believe me, I've tried. But with a drone, that's a totally different story. Focusing on the scenery just as much as the train brings the shot to a whole nother level, and I'm always super psyched about the results. The Mavic isn't only for videos either. I was chasing the O&NW on another occasion whenever I figured I could get a cool still shot of the train, downtown Tavares, and Lake Dora. Whether it's taking still shots of moving trains or moving shots of still trains, the Mavic always comes in handy. One Saturday morning, I was out waiting for the Florida Central Railroad's Eustis turn and decided to circle around their GP9RM number 7063. Not necessarily a crucial component to my video production, but nonetheless a neat complement to my pace shots. One final benefit of using the Mavic is for reconnaissance. By getting a bird's eye view of wherever I go, I'm able to look down below at the tracks and see what's inside of the rail cars. This perk has helped me on more than one occasion, as knowing what is or isn't on a train can clue you in to where the cars might or might not go. One Sunday morning, I was at CSX's Rand Yard in Sanford watching local A766 perform some switching whenever I peered down into the nearest cut of hopper cars and saw they were loaded. Knowing this is where hoppers for Conrad Yelvington are set out and that they unload their hoppers on weekdays, I was back again the next morning hoping to see some action. I saw just that, all thanks to knowing what was in those hopper cars, courtesy of my Mavic Pro. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the behind-the-scenes editing of drone railfanning, mostly because, admittedly, I am no good with color correction or anything else in that department. What I do consider myself good at, however, is synchronizing my drone videos with my ground level videos. Because my Mavic doesn't record with sound, I keep my camcorder rolling just as long as I do the Mavic, and then overlay the sound onto my Mavic footage. I also like to throw in a shot of the engines passing me on the ground, but usually revert back to the drone shot once the engines have rolled by. This gives two different views of the same train and turns out awesome, like this example of the Florida Midland Railroad tiptoeing through the citrus groves. I hope this video gave a nice look behind the scenes of how I railfan with a drone. It's super fun stuff and can turn out awesome. Thanks for railfanning with me today, and don't forget to subscribe if you liked this video.